What you will see in this video is not an indictment of any one state administration. The neglect of school trust lands is as old as Utah. We are encouraged by discussions currently taking place in the legislature, in the governor's office, in our congressional delegation, and among state agencies regarding proper management of our school trust lands. We won't solve all of our school funding problems by gaining a maximum return from the trust lands. It will take time to build the permanent fund. But if we act now, we can begin to build the future for our children and our children's children. It's a matter of trust. Utah, we are a pretty great state, and our beauty is enjoyed by millions of visitors every year, a resource we gladly share. We have another precious resource in Utah. The way we develop that resource is less than great. You see, while our spaces are wide open, our classrooms are crowded. While we are sharing our natural beauty with the rest of the world, our children are sharing textbooks with each other. We are rich in natural beauty. We are rich in natural resources. And we are rich in children. But our wages are below the national average. And we spend less per pupil on our children's education than any other state in the nation. We need more money for our children's education. But where is it going to come from? Well, there are no easy solutions. But one important source of school revenue is being neglected: land. You see, the school children of Utah own millions of acres of Utah land, school trust lands that were intended to provide revenue for Utah schools. Unfortunately, those lands have often been underused, misused, or just plain wasted. Millions of dollars have been lost, and much more will be lost unless we make some changes. Just what are the school trust lands and where are they? Now let's quickly review a little Utah history and geography. The school trust lands came into being with Utah statehood to help ensure that education would be adequately funded. Congress dedicated 1/9 of the land in the new state to the public schools. Nearly 6 million acres of Utah land were placed in trust for the sole purpose of funding the education of Utah's children. The very enabling act that granted statehood granted those lands to our school children, and our state constitution acknowledges that grant. That's the history. Now for the geography. Utah, like other public land states, is surveyed into squares called townships. Each one 6 miles on a side, and each township is further subdivided into 36 1-square-mile sections. Now, they couldn't know at the time which lands would be most valuable, so Congress systematically granted sections numbered 2, 16, 32, and 36 for the support of schools in Utah. The result is a checkerboard pattern of school trust land spread over the entire state. The fact that those lands were placed in trust is extremely important. So let's talk to Robert Schmid, professor of law at the University of Utah and an expert in land law and natural resources law.
Trust is a split ownership device for property. With the legal title in a trustee, the trustee then has the obligation to manage and safeguard the property for the benefit of someone else. That someone else we call the beneficiary or beneficiaries. And the beneficiary or beneficiaries have what we call beneficial title or equitable title, and that means they have the benefit of the property. For example, the income of the property. There is an obligation on the trustee to manage the property, manage it well, take good care of it. That obligation runs directly to the beneficiaries. Under the law, the trustee cannot use the property for his own benefit, nor can he use the property for the benefit of third parties, even though it might be a very nice political thing to do. The courts have held very consistently that this grant of land to the state of Utah and other states, other western states, many of them have received similar grants, has created a trust relationship with the obligation on the state to manage and protect these lands for the benefit of the school children who are the beneficiaries of this land. Not for the benefit of the state as a whole, and not for the benefit of other state agencies and organizations. The law is very clear on this. However, unfortunately, as one looks at what has happened in Utah, the law has not always been followed.
The responsibilities of a trustee are clearly defined by law. Legally, our school children's interest in the trust must come first. But do they? Have our children been getting the maximum benefit? Let's see. We began with 5.8 million acres of trust lands, but historically, Utah's philosophy has been to sell as many of those acres as possible, often with precious little concern for getting the best price. Today, the children have 3.6 million acres of surface rights and an additional 1 million acres of mineral rights. The money from trust land sales, mineral leases, and mineral royalties is deposited in a permanent account. The interest from that account helps to fund education year by year. How large is the account after nearly 100 years? $44 million. Now that sounds like a lot of money. Let's see how well surrounding states have done with their school trust lands. Now we can't make a comparison with Nevada because Nevada sold nearly all of its trust lands soon after statehood. But Colorado began with 3.7 million acres and has a trust fund balance of more than $200 million. So Colorado has made $54 per acre from its original grant. Idaho has earned $85 per acre and has $251 million in its fund. Arizona, $58 per acre and a $467 million fund. Wyoming, $200 per acre and a $696 million balance. New Mexico, $289 per acre and a trust fund balance of $2.5 billion. How does Utah compare? Our children's trust lands have earned an embarrassing $7.51 an acre. Why has Utah earned so little? Let's begin by asking Bernard First, former state school superintendent and former education representative on the state land board.
Hundreds of thousands of dollars. Have all of Utah's trust land sales been made with the best interest of Utah's children in mind? The answer is no. For example, in 1968, a bill was pushed through the Utah legislature that required the sale of 88,000 acres at $2.50 per acre. It just happened that these were prime oil and gas lease lands in the Book Cliffs area. Recently, 2,400 acres of trust lands in the St. George area were sold for $333 per acre with no interest and with no payment required for 76 months. The purchaser has already sold some of this land for as much as $10,000 per acre. Now, what about the trust lands that we lease to others? Are we getting the maximum return for our schools from these lands? The answer again is no. The Bureau of Land Management, a federal agency, has an aggressive co-leasing program that has brought as high as $2,300 per acre, while Utah, on the other hand, has only resulted in a pathetic $12 an acre for its coal trust lands. This has resulted in tens of millions of dollars of loss to the schools of Utah and to our children. Utah has the only mineable deposits of beryllium in the United States, yet the state charges only a 4% royalty for this strategically and economically vital mineral. And what about the salt for which we are famous? We get 10 cents per ton, the same incredibly low rate that was set in 1957. Are we doing any better with our surface leases? Again, the answer is no. The military leases thousands of acres of school land at an average price of 49 cents per acre per year. Using the state's own formula for determining lease values, that would mean the land is worth less than $6 an acre. Then there's livestock grazing. The school children did earn about $430,000 in 1991. But should they be earning more? Utah's grazing fees are the lowest in the nation. In 1990, New Mexico earned 15 times as much money from only twice as much grazing land. State agencies like the National Guard and the Division of Wildlife Resources have received such favorable deals on the use of state school lands that the children have lost hundreds of thousands of dollars in those revenues over the years. Now for the really bad news. The state actually charged more for the administration of those lands than they realized from the land users. This means that the children of our state actually subsidized those surface leases.
By now, it probably appears that we may be our own worst enemies. But federal agencies don't exactly have our children's best interests in mind either. Besides the insultingly low prices paid by the military for surface leases, more than 250,000 acres of trust lands have been captured within national parks, Indian reservations, national forests, national landmarks, and conservation initiatives. Because they're scattered within sensitive areas, these inholdings are almost impossible to develop. In effect, the federal government uses our children's land without any compensation. In the words of one federal employee, "Why should we buy these lands? We already have them." And unlike other states, Utah historically has made only feeble attempts to obtain compensation. Here's Ken Raid, Issues Coordinator for the Southern Utah Wilderness Alliance.
Well, broadly speaking, all school trust lands are in holdings, because when you look at the mosaic of land ownership in the state of Utah, you see that all school trust lands are surrounded by national forests, they're surrounded by Bureau of Land Management lands, they're surrounded by national park lands, they're surrounded by private lands, and they're also surrounded by other state lands. When you hear the term inholding, generally it may be referring to school trust lands held inside national forests, inside national parks, and inside areas being considered by Congress for wilderness designation. There are certain areas that are simply extremely sensitive. National parks are wilderness areas. These are gems of time. You've got school trust lands in many of these areas, and to consider developing these school trust lands to their full economic potential is an unforgivable inequity to future generations, because they won't be able to share in the same splendor of these national parks, of these wilderness areas. They have a certain spirit about them that won't be there. And that's why we need to move the state out of these areas into areas where they can be guaranteed a stream of revenue, and out of areas that have everlasting value to the national interest and to the state interest as well. What we should see is we should see the state and the federal government work together to try to move the state land holdings outside of those areas being considered by Congress for wilderness designation. By their very nature, because they're still being considered for wilderness designation, they aren't generating any real revenue. They're still primitive. What kind of revenue can be generated from lands that are basically primitive in nature? Very little. The returns have been negligible. It's a win-win solution to get the state out of these areas, because then they can move into areas that can provide them with a resource that's more consistent with their mandate. They can be moved into mineral estate, coal lands, oil and gas lands. And then what you've got is you've got the state with consolidated ownership of revenue-generating lands, and you've got the federal government with consolidated ownership of areas that are of critical environmental concern. Other states have recognized that by investing personnel time into working on these exchanges, into trying to get the state out of these inholdings, there can be an incredible return on that investment of time. It just hasn't been the case in Utah.
How much trust land revenue has been lost or wasted during the century since statehood? If our school trust fund had only grown at a rate equal to the average of the surrounding states, excluding Nevada, it would now contain $671 million, instead of just $44 million. And $54 million more in interest earnings would be available for our children's education every year. What would another $54 million a year contribute to that education? How about an additional 3 books per year per student, plus 6 elementary schools, plus 400 computerized math labs? Or we could eliminate all current school fees and reduce class size by 3 students in grades kindergarten through 3rd, and buy 600,000 books. $54 million would also build 3 new junior high schools and 2 new high schools, with enough left over for 700 computer workstations for students every year. Or consider how much could be restored for school music programs, for providing adequate counseling, and for helping students with special needs. Wishful thinking? Yes, if we keep doing business in the same old way, if we don't make ourselves heard, if we don't hold our elected and appointed officials accountable, both here and in Washington. What can you do? Urge your state representatives to support efforts to reform the administration of school trust lands. Let your congressional representatives know you are very angry about the federal government's unfair treatment of our school children. Attend town meetings. Ask questions. Support gubernatorial and legislative candidates who are pledged to reforming trust lands management and who have a plan for doing so. Support legislation that provides for rebuilding the Permanent Trust Fund. Add your name to our list of concerned citizens. The broader our support is, the better the chance we have to set things right. Why get involved? Because it's time to manage the trust for maximum benefit. Because our children count on us to do all we can for them. Because it's a matter of trust.